Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Charles Sabanson, and welcome you guys to another episode of the DREAMERSPRO show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and when we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. And today we got a hell of a show in store for you guys. Before we get into it, please make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, this is going to be a very interesting one because it was something that I couldn't even foresee coming. Of all of the things happening right now in the sports world, this was the last thing that would ever pop up on my news feed. So what happened this morning, I was going through the internet and I was actually combing through Awful Announcing's website, and I came across a pretty interesting article where they were discussing some comments that Skip Bayless made on the Skip Bayless show. As you guys know, Skip Bayless has a show that he does on YouTube, and on this particular segment, or during this particular segment, he was talking about the dichotomy that exists in the sports world between sports fans and white athletes. But in particular, he was talking about the NBA. And essentially what he was doing was he was describing a moment that he had at ESPN where he gave a particular white player a certain amount of coverage, and he brought a racial aspect into a particular segment that they were doing on ESPN, and it ended up causing him to be approached by one of the managers at ESPN, who was basically questioning why he would do something like that on television, and essentially saying, why would you take a racial angle on a sports show? And then it caused Skip Bayless to kind of get into this explanation about it. And then he was talking about how Nikola Jokic and other players are perceived when they come into the NBA. And it created a pretty interesting conversation that I think the audience is going to find to be interesting. So that's why I said, okay, let's talk about it here today. So these are the comments that we want to focus on. But before we even get into what Skip had to say, today's video is brought to you by sponsor, Game Time. With only 4 months left until the end of the year, I look forward to creating special moments with family and friends by attending various theaters, shows, plays, and sporting events. And when it comes time for me to look for tickets, I absolutely love to use Game Time. Game Time is one of the most reliable marketplaces for last-minute tickets to the most popular events in sports, music, and theater in more than 60 cities across the United States and Canada. Game Time saves me money, time, and peace of mind, so I don't have to sort through thousands of tickets looking for the best prices or worry about whether or not if they're authentic or whether I'm going to receive them on time. Game Time Picks, one of my favorite Game Time tools, analyzes thousands of tickets for all of your favorite events near your location and finds you the best possible deal so you don't have to. For example, I'm looking forward to this upcoming concert at Madison Square Garden of one of my favorite composers, Hans Zimmer. Here I can select the all-in price to see the total ticket price up front, no hidden fees. And now I can sort through the best possible deals I can find. I can choose the cheapest deals, the great deal, or the amazing deal. Once you select the ticket you want, you can use their panoramic seat view to ensure you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. And if you're like me and always make plans at the last minute, you can grab tickets up to 90 minutes after the event has started. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and use redeem code CLNS for $20 off. And remember, whenever you support this sponsor, you're supporting this channel. Thank you. So what we want to do now is I want to play in full what Skip had to say on the Skip Bayless show. I want you guys to listen to it in its entirety, and then we're going to come back and continue on the show. Take a listen to Skip Bayless here.
Okay. Bear with me on this. This is about white people. Well, it's actually about white basketball players, more specifically American white basketball players, with one final qualification. This is about white American basketball centers, as in bigs, as in fives, as in what I used to say back in the day on ESPN, and what I'm saying now about the amazing Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren is shattering the mold of the white stiff. I've always been very publicly honest about what, for a long time, I thought of taking American white centers in the lottery, first 13 picks, which was don't, just don't. Yep, there had been a Bill Walton, just all time. There had been a Dave Cowens in Boston, very good. There'd been a Chris Kaman, even a Brooke Lopez. They've had their moments. But there have been so many other American white centers who were drafted way too high only because they were 7 feet or taller. The Mokeskis and the Drylings and the Nevitts and the Koncaks and the Ostertags and the Chris Mims. There was even a Shinsis. I could go on. But for me, a huge NBA fan that I am, this hit the fan just before the 2012 draft. This was soon after LeBron won his first ring. Player in question was 7'1" Illinois center Myers Leonard, who was being projected to go late lottery. And on first take, I said, no way. I'd seen enough of Myers Leonard in college basketball, and I said on TV that I'm always a little leery of American centers going in the lottery, American white centers going in the lottery, not foreign-born centers. They often have a much higher skill set, skill level, often come from tough backgrounds with a tough background edge. From Arvydas Sabonis to now Nikola Jokic, the Euro centers have consistently proven to be worth high picks. But Myers Leonard, no. But of course, my mere mention of white on TV sent the bloggers into tizzy fits. You can't say that on TV. Was I being racist? Was I being reverse racist? How about I was being right? How about I was just being honest? But of course, I got a call from ESPN PR. The PR woman was very upset with me, and she asked, why did you have to bring up race? And I explained how over the previous, 20 or so years, white American centers had been bad lottery bets. I gave her the facts. She said, well, you could have made that point without bringing up race. I said, no, in this case, race is the point. And after all, I am white, so it wasn't like I was a white commentator ripping black American centers. No, this was, so to speak, white on white crime. Maybe for some white people, that was their problem with what I was saying.
So you heard what Skip had to say. What are my thoughts? Well, before I get into my actual opinions on what he had to say, I think there's something interesting about it. And I think what's interesting is that the fact that ESPN called him in to talk to him about why would you take a racial angle on the show and all of that. The irony in all of that is that ESPN ended up turning into one of the most political voices in sports media that we have out there. We all know this. ESPN seems to be a left-leaning network. They seem to have a lot of left views, and it's one of the times, for instance, I remember this segment a number of years ago with Will Cain, Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith, and they were arguing whether or not an athlete should go see the president, because I think at the time some athletes refused to go see, I think, Donald Trump in office when they won a championship. As you guys know, it's a tradition that whenever a particular team wins a championship in the respective sports, they usually go meet the president. And some athletes were saying that they want to skip that event, and they were talking about all of that. So in all of those debates that ESPN has had over the years, they seem to have a left-leaning point of view from the majority of their analysts. I think recently we did a show not too long ago where we were talking, I think, about Kendrick Perkins and some other people. No, was it Kendrick Perkins, Ryan Clark, and others? And they immediately took a left-leaning point of view, and we discussed that. So for ESPN to be kind of reprimanding Skip Bayless and trying to get to the bottom of why he took a political stand or took a racial stance or racial point of view, when ESPN goes hard in on race and all of that stuff, and is one of the reasons some people are turned off by the network, I find that to be a little bit ironic. But let's get back to what Skip had to say. Skip was addressing 2 points. The first point is it taboo to talk about race in sports? And the second point is there a bias against white players, and in this case centers, specifically when it comes to the NBA? Well, let's talk about the first part. Is it taboo to discuss race in sports? I don't really think it is taboo. I think that there's obviously this point of view out there where you try to separate politics and political views with sports. We actually have a political channel where, you know, we talk politics and we talk all of that, and we don't do that on this channel. The reason we choose not to do it is for a few reasons, actually. Number one, we know that the number one reason people are tuning into this show is for sports, right? That's kind of what we're selling them on. So for us to now go out there and start taking political stances and saying this and saying that, I think we would be misrepresenting what we do. And I think we may turn off some viewers because that's not what they signed up for. I think they signed up for what they got initially coming into the door. So what we did was, let's just create a separate channel, number one. Number two, I've also noticed that when we do some shows that may have some political element in them, we end up losing a lot of subscribers, regardless of the view we take. Because no matter what position you take, you're going to offend some people. Like yesterday, the news broke that LeBron James endorsed Kamala Harris, right? And there were people out there. He endorsed her on Twitter. So I went to his Twitter page and I was reading through some of the comments. Some people were flaming LeBron. I used to support you. I no longer support you. And then there was some people that were applauding him. And I think if LeBron had decided to endorse Donald Trump, it would have been the inverse of that. Oh, I already knew you was a sellout. And so this is why I just said, you know what? Let's just go to let's create a platform where we can discuss that and discuss that exclusively. And let's not mix the two. So there's one thing. But does it happen in sports? Of course it does. Right? Of course it does. Inevitably it does, especially when you have large societal issues like the Colin Kaepernick situation. Of course, you have the situation with like Kyrie Irving and the Brooklyn Nets. There is some type of racial element there. So, you know, in cases like that is going to come in. But I think it's something that in general, some, not all, because some sports fans have no issue with race and sports being intertwined. But I think it's something that turns off some people. In the case of there being a bias against certain white players in the NBA, I'm not so sure about that. Although there are some instances where it leaves one scratching their heads, but I don't really think so. I think if you speak to some or a good amount of NBA fans, they respect the white players that are good. I think a lot of them like Nikola Jokic. I think a lot of them like Luka Doncic. Not because they're white. I think it's because these dudes can play ball. Right. And I don't think that their race holds them back from them being accepted by other groups just because they're white or they're not black. Right. So I don't see that. Now, there are some people that say some crazy stuff that you can see there is some type of racial element. Like if you look at some of the stuff Gilbert Arenas has said, and I'm not talking behind his back because I've said this already publicly and he's seen it. Some of the stuff he said about European players and all of that, like there's a little bit of that where it's like, okay, they may be soft and all of these different, there are some stereotypes there that some people try to expand upon. But overall, I think that NBA fans generally respect white players, but this is just my point of view. So what I want to know from the audience, number one, do you think it's okay to discuss race, race in sports, number one? And number two, do you think that there's this bias against white players in the NBA? Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section, and we'll catch you guys on the next show. Peace.